The occasion is truly an amazing one because it is actually this Pantocrator fresco that we have in our church. When we started this project of beautification, of course, a lot of thought went into what ought to be represented there. And we were keenly aware that we are the Serbian community of the national capital. So we had to somehow convey this identity that we have here to our guests and our visitors, but also to remind our future generations of who we are. And in that sense, we thought the best way to do that and to retain our identity and to pass it on to future generations is through frescography, and everything that we do in church to somehow reflect our long and venerable history that we have as an ethnic group here in this country. So the thought went into what can we do to in our beautification project, because it is truly something that stays for many decades, hundreds of years, perhaps even longer, judging by the sacred monasteries and churches that we have in the old country. And I went to Professor Popovic because I know that she is a renowned art historian, an expert in Orthodox iconography, and we sat and we talked, and I had this dilemma. The original idea was to copy frescoes from our old monasteries, and to, in that sense, represent our culture here and our history. And we sat down. Actually, she was very well prepared. She needed a little bit of time. She studied a few of her books. She has a vast library on Orthodox iconography. And when I came, she was ready. She had 5 or 6 books, and she said, "These are the options. What do you think?" And we sat down and we discussed this for a couple of hours in her basement. And we thought the best way forward, because the first impression that we leave in church will be make or break for the beautification project. So we were keenly aware that we, right there and then we were making history. So we needed to approach this very seriously. And we thought perhaps given the situation in the old country, our long-suffering brothers and sisters throughout Serbian lands, but especially in Kosovo and Metohija, and given that some of the best iconography, Serbian iconography, is in Kosovo and Metohija, in fact, that we should select something from that region, from southern Serbia. And Professor Popovic then suggested that we go with this fresco of Christ Pantocrator from Bogorodica Ljeviška, which is in Prizren. Prizren is an imperial city, and Bogorodica Ljeviška is a church from the 14th century. But she will probably tell us a lot more about that. But there is that connection between our culture, our roots in Serbia, with our existence here on this continent. And we are proud of that long and venerable history that we have. But we are proud also that we as a parish have so many wonderful people, experts in various fields, and that we can call upon them to help us grow. And that is why I'm especially grateful to Professor Popovic for being here today to explain to all our parishioners who are willing to hear. And perhaps you will be the ambassadors and agents later on, spreading this knowledge that you will receive today to the rest of our parish of what the general idea was when we made these plans for the frescography, and also for the fresco of Christ Pantocrator, and also we are grateful to her for all her kindness and support throughout the years to our parish, and to her family for being our founding fathers. May God bless you, Professor, for many years, and thank you for everything you do and you will do for our parish.
Thank you, Father Vasilia, for inviting me. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for taking time to stay after lunch. Also, I want to thank Vladimir for technical help, and I want to thank Milica for prodding me to do a lecture like this. I apologize for my voice, but I hope it will come back. Also, for the equipment, it is old equipment because I stopped teaching 18 years ago, and during that time maybe I delivered about 10 scholarly presentations while teaching, and I'm a little rough now. I was prepared probably 8 to 10 lectures a week. So my routine is now relaxed. So I want you to tie your seat belts because we are flying. First, we are flying to United States, to the state of Maryland, to Potomac, to visit Serbian Church of St. Luke. When you come into the St. Luke, you will look around and first spot a magnificent icon of the Virgin Odigitria. It came to us from Hilandar Monastery on Mount Athos, and it belongs to a special category. The image is not made by human hands. It goes back to the tradition of the image painted by St. Luke, who is our patron saint, and he was, among other things, a painter. So he started painting the Virgin and Child. They had a break. When they came back, the icon was ready. Icon means a true portrait. Then the original was brought to Constantinople in the 5th century, and then from that the type went around the world, and tradition was even seen in the Northern Renaissance painting because Roger van der Weyden was shown painting such an icon. Then you will sit down in the first row, if you can, and look at the iconostasis in our church. New edition, beautiful. But then you will gaze into the dome and see the image of the Pantocrator. Christ is depicted in half figure, with right hand against the chest blessing. The other variation is extended arm, and in the left hand he holds, in this case, a closed gospel book. Christ is backed by 8-pointed star of light. Between the rays of light are 8 figures. In this case, 4 figures of angels carrying symbols, which I will explain later, and the other half of the figures are 4 evangelists. They are edition, iconographic edition. Below the circle of Christ and angels and evangelist symbols is the inscription. We will talk about it later, and I'll ask the Father why he chose that particular one. Okay, now tighten your belts, because we are going to take a spaceship and go back in time, go to the 14th century, to the area of Kosovo. Since it is unstable today, in this time and age, we have to go back to the 14th century. And this is how I imagine Kosovo. This is a 13th painting from 1913 by Nadezhda Petrovic, representing the symbols of Kosovo, the peonies. Then to just imagine the area, because the city where we are going to Prizren is on the north slope of Ashara Mountains. So just imagine how it looks like. This is the Rugovo Canyon. Beyond that, I want to show you this image. This is a map showing Serbian Orthodox churches on Kosovo and Metohija. We don't know how many survived, but very few. There's also the estates of those churches which were given by the donors in Metohija. the area which is very rich land. The estates were confiscated by the states in 1945 and never returned. Now the other people occupy those lands. But enough about politics. To show you one of those little smaller churches, I'm showing you Church of Bogorodica in Mušutište, dated in 1315. This is how it looked. This is how it looks now. Also, it was surrounded like any other churches by cemeteries. Serbian cemeteries are there no more. Then turn our attention now to the city of Prizren. It was a royal city, it was an imperial city, it was a rich city. Why? Because it was on trade routes and also it was surrounded by rich mines. So mining and commerce made the city extremely rich. In the beginning of the 14th century, Kralj Milutin has extended its power at the expense of Byzantium to the south, and of course these areas were already under his rules. Kralj Milutin took throne as a single ruler in 1282 and died in 1341. His biographer tells us that during his long reign, he built around 40 churches and foundations, not only in the territory of Serbia, but on Mount Athos, in Thessaloniki, in Constantinople, and in Jerusalem. These were not single churches, but estates which contained hospitals and everything else. So, one of most significant early buildings by King Milutin is the church dedicated to the Dormition of the Virgin, now known as just as the Virgin Ljeviška, because of the area where the church is. We don't know much about classical origin of Prizren. There are some remains built into some architectural remains. But we know for certain that by the 6th century of our era, there was an episcopal church in the city, dating from the 6th century, probably from the period of Justinian. We know it was a basilica. It lasted until 9th century, and it was rebuilt, again in basilical form, probably three-nave basilica. Nave and two side aisles. Something happened in the 13th century and churches needed to be renovated. We know that because in the church there are fragments of 13th century frescoes. On those, the inscriptions are in Serbian. Then the church was obviously in very bad state, and it was rebuilt by King Milutin and his architect, about whom we shall hear in just a minute. The church had, let me get my pointer, the bell tower, outer narthex, exonarthex, inner narthex, and in the exterior you can easily see the main dome where the Pantocrator is, and 4 smaller domes. They also contain image of of Christ, and we shall see them in a minute. The church was built of Siga stone blocks, which in sunlight have pinkish shine. The blocks were framed by 4 bricks, and in between, of course, held by mortar. Originally, the church was covered with lead. longitudinal section and cross section. Main dome, here, and here is a bell tower, which at one time was converted into a Muslim, whatever the name is. Minaret. Okay, very important and interesting part is the apse, rectangular main apse, and surrounded by brick inscription, which you can see, in which the King Milutin is mentioned, as well as Archbishop Sava III. Here's Archbishop Sava copy. Then we are returning, we are looking at the ground plan. Here is Exonartex, we are entering here, and this is probably the most interesting part for me, because it has an interesting inscription which survived. Because it was the most extreme western part of the church, the most important painting in it was that of the Last Judgment, very appropriate for the location. On the south side, on one of the belly of the arches, there was a painted area imitating parchment. The initial letter was written in red. The rest is written in black, in Serbian, talking about the obligation that the church had for its poor parishioner. Every day they had to distribute the food and drinks, and especially much during the holidays. And it has to be given in the exact amount as given to the two artists which are listed there. One was Protomaster Nicola, the other is Astrapa. We don't know much about Nicola, but scholars assume that he also was the architect of Gračanica, because he was the first, and we know something about Astrapa. Scholars assume that he was the architect of this church too. How about Astrapa? This is just an epithet, means a swift one, or somebody who does something fast. We met Astrapa as Michailo Astrapa together with Eutichius, two painters who we believe were schooled in Thessaloniki and started working in Ohrid in 1995 in the Church of the Virgin Perivleptos. There they left innumerable signature. We did not find signature in the Church of the Virgin Ljeviška. So, just for fun, I brought some of the signatures of the painters from the Virgin Perivleptos. They hide it in the decoration on the drapery. Mihail and Astrapas, and Mihail Astrapas, Mihail, probably Protomaster, Mihail, then the frescoes. I shall come back to the church. We don't know exactly when the Virgin, the Church of the Virgin was converted into a mosque, but certainly by the 16th century. In the 19th century, it was abandoned because the lead was lifted off its roof, the water penetrated, the frescoes were damaged even more. But when the church was converted into a mosque, the iconoclastic Islam could not stand the painted images. So the frescoes had to be covered with plaster, but the plaster would not hold the fresco surface because it was very smooth. So every fresco has to be beaten, hole created, and new plaster applied to hold. So this is how, when the church was then an art monument, was restored between 1950 and 1953, cleaned up frescoes look like this. This is how they look now after the restoration. The restorer in Serbia believed that they should show the damages to the frescoes, while the Italian, for instance, believed a total restoration. So when you go to Giotto works in Padua, you don't know what's Giotto, what is total restoration. So you see the Virgin and Child restored, but you can notice the restored parts. Then we move to the inner narthex, where we find the portraits of the Nemanjić dynasty. I do not have King Milutin from that area, but I brought the monograph published in 1975. Text is written by Draga Panic and Gordana Babic, and on the cover is the image of Kralj Milutin from this particular church, his first most significant building. So we see the Nemanjić dynasty, Saint Simeon, Nemanja, and sons, and Sveti Sava is included in his red-haired version, blonde version. In that area, two other important paintings were done. The Tree of Jesse and the illustration of the hymn to the Virgin, the Prophet's Annuncio. Both are related to the iconography of the Nemanjić dynasty, which is not yet shown as the imitation of Tree of Jesse, connecting the Jesus Christ to King David through actually to Joseph, but it's another matter. And this is Milutin from Gračanica in his old age, so I had to show you the donor. Some of the inscription from the Virgin Ljeviška, both in Serbian and in Greek. Also, inscription from the text. The piers, the Basilica Church had to be converted, but much remain of basilical shape. Some of the pillars have been changed. The corner pillars have been changed in order to support the dome, and so on. But all the pillars are covered with standing figures, martyrs of every kind, female martyrs, male martyrs, holy warriors, holy saints, number of ladies addressed like imperial princesses rather than in humble garments. Remember, Simonida was already Serbian court for about 7-8 years. She was brought there in 1299 from the Byzantine court, and of course these are imitating her fashion. The church was rebuilt between 1306 and 7, and after that, probably a year or so, after it dried out and new layer of plaster was placed, it was painted. Probably 1308, 1309, probably a year to finish such an undertaking. Now we look at the small domes. The four small domes contain 4 images of Christ. Below Christ a father from the Old Testament. Christ as a youth, Emmanuel. Christ in his own age. Christ as a high priest. Finally, Christ as the Elder of Days. He is identified by white beard. Finally, we turn our attention, and is it clear, to the main dome of the Virgin Ljeviška. Christ Pantocrator, behind him the burst of 8 stars of light. And we will see the connection between the light here and also the inscription around the dome in our church. Then between the points of the stars, rays emanate, and then there are 8 angels carrying the symbols or scrolls inscribed with the text from prophets. I worked and identified all the prophets, although texts are damaged, but I knew them. For instance, this is Zechariah the Younger, and we are not dealing with the prophets because I spent about 40 years of my life just studying the prophets, because scholars say all the same, and I collected 700 examples from Byzantine churches, found no identical cycle with the same figures and same quotations. So it's always another interpretation. The angels are bringing the prophets the divine word through the symbol or text. The close-up view of Pantocrator and the angels. An angel flying down and the figure of prophet, inscribed text. This is Isaiah. Here again, the damage in Bogorodica Perilepra, it was not filled. The representation of Christ, look at the position of hand holding the closed gospel book, and then rays of light, divine light, and symbols of the evangelist. Once again, remember that there is also light here coming, and it is very similar but not identical with our thing. And before you go to Kosovo, you ought to be armed with knowledge. In the lower part of the church, and this is from the apse, there is a painted drapery. And on the drapery, there are painted double-headed eagles. They are now black. And they are now claimed as symbols of the new majority in Kosovo. However, the famous copyist and painter Zdenka Živković told me personally that these figures were painted vermilion red, royal colors. And they have, because they are organic matter, they oxidized in time. And that's how they are appropriated in the new culture. And this is Pantocrator from Gračanica, showing completely different arrangement. He holds the gospel book, handed extended, and indeed is divine liturgy and so on. The iconographic of the dome has changed. But before I depart with you, and before we have a series of questions, I want to show you the image which is dearest to me from this church. It is hidden in a chapel over the north aisle, which is called Hatihumena, and it is painted with the scenes from the life of St. Nicholas. Santa Claus, and I wish you will all keep such an image in your house, those of you who have small children, showing them how the original Santa Claus looked like. And before he became Santa Claus, he went to school. Here is St. Nicholas led to school. Here is a little tablet he carries, and tablet is inscribed with alphabet, alpha, beta, gamma, delta, actually, as, buki, jezi, glagol, and so on. And down below is a seated teacher surrounded by small children, and they are reading Psaltery, being educated. Thank you very much, and I hope I didn't keep you too long. And please ask any questions. I will try to answer, but I want to ask Father, just a moment please, Father Vasilie, why did you choose the text around Christ? It says, of course, ego emito fostu cosmu, I am the light of the world, therefore explaining the burst of light around Christ. But in Levishka I didn't have it. So.
Yes, because there are several inscriptions that are appropriate for Christ the Pantocrator, historically. One of them is this one, and it ties up very nicely with the composition of Christ the Pantocrator. As you explained yourself, the light that emanates from Christ, the invisible light, is something
the divine light.
The divine light is, and that's the
text is related to it.
Related to the
because the
divine
other
light.
type of text are also chosen inscribed around Christ, and I especially like one at the time of trouble. They say that, Lord, hear the humans and beheld the earth, listening in the hard time, and it's very relevant to our time and age.
Yes.
Okay? Any questions? Any questions? Please, thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes, let me come here so I can hear, maybe hear the light now.
Yes, so I will come closer. So my question is about Mikhail Astrapes.
Yes.
Is he, do we know if he was Greek or Slav?
We assume that he was Greek, that he was taught in Thessaloniki, and the earliest signature of the artist that we have survived in Serbian art is in the dome of Studenica. But we have all the inscription, but the name of the artist is lost because of the water damage. So these are 13th century artists. Much building is going on in Serbia. Serbia is growing, and they painted the Virgin Perivra from Ohrid, Levishka, the signature. In Staro Nagoričino there is Mihajlo's signature, but probably in St. Nikita, in Skopska Crna Gora, and possibly Gračanica, no signatures found. If not, they are pupils, because there was a team working rather than just two artists. They were proto-masters. Yes.
How likely was it that Astrapes worked on both Studenica and Levishka because of the passage of time between?
No, in Studenica, another artist. Yes, another artist, but whose name we lost. This is the first preserved signature of an artist, but name is gone in the dome of Studenica. And then there are subsequent other artists, other names. But they work in the period about 25 years, and that probably is the life of an artist. They can do it. Okay, other questions? Yes?
You mentioned Nicola and Astrapa. Do we know some more details about them?
No, that we assume that they are called the best city after Constantinople, in Thessaloniki. But that is assumption. And I don't know that their signatures are found elsewhere, or even in a manuscript. because iconography is copied from one medium to the other. Yes.
Professor Popovic, thank you so much. That was a great lecture, and I've been looking in Jeviška for many years, but
I
there was
know
really
it is.
so many new things. So I have one question.
Please.
King Milutin was Sveti Kralj, right?
Yes.
Because he built 40
Yeah.
churches. What would be your favorite one?
Which would you? Nerezi. It's a 12th century church built for a Byzantine prince, which is also Pantocrator 5-dome church, but it is very, very expressive. But St. Nicita in Skopska Crna Gora is especially dear to me, because once I visited it, I found their nun, Sister Veronica, alone guarding the church. And she said that she was a hunchback, and she said, they sent me to church because nobody wanted to marry me. And it was a sad story, but she was happy. And then people came from Skopska Crna Gora. That was 1964 or 65. And then there were Serbs there, and they complained, they are changing our identifications, and when they change our identity cards, they change our names. And we have to choose either ski or off. Okay, yes, either those who are inclined to be Macedonian or ski, yeah, opredeljenje, or pro-Bulgarian. That I saw, and somehow that smallest of this group of churches came to my mind, came to my heart. I saw St. Nasita, Staronagorično church dedicated to St. George, which is about maybe third in a row of these big churches built for King Milutin. And the door was open, holy books were thrown, torn up, dirty, abandoned, horrible. Now you are getting invited by publications to come and visit Byzantine Kosovo. To whom the churches belong? The donors gave it to the Lord, to the saint to whom it was dedicated, and it was also donors then, but not to any political system. Sorry to be political. I don't want to, but I have to. Any other questions? Thank you. I wasn't too long.
Do you want to go home, or do you want to get another answer? Because I have a question.
Yes.
Well, you mentioned the Jeviška, monastery Jeviška.
No, it was a cathedral church.
Cathedral, sorry. Which has 5 domes. Is that the only cathedral like that, or there are more?
Monastery, in Serbia, majority of churches in the cities were lost. So we have monastic churches because they are hidden. The closest 5-dome church was St. Panteleon in Nerezi, 12th century church, Byzantine, built for a Byzantine prince. And then Milutin built Staronagorično as a Pentatrurion, built Gračanica as a 5-dome church. Its origin is from Constantinople, and it is related to the imperial funerary churches.
Thank you.
Okay, a little refreshment Dragana prepared.
In conclusion, I would just like to once again express our deepest gratitude to Professor Popovic for sharing with us her vast knowledge and experience in these things, and for being a most valuable guide and advisor in the beautification project of our church.
Well,
May God bless you and preserve you in many years.
Thank you.